That's what Psycho was based on.
This is a shot from Hitchcock.
The camera always sees the truth.
It's fantastic. We're going to watch films from throughout your career.
Roman Polanski's made some of the most daring films of the last 40 years.
Where'd you get the midget?
Chinatown became one of the greatest films of the 70s.
You're a very nosy fellow, kitty cat, huh? You know what happens to nosy fellows? They lose their noses.
Rosemary's Baby had been a best-selling novel.
Somebody help me!
Polanski turned it into a movie as dazzling as Hitchcock at his best. The man behind these films survived the Holocaust, but his mother was gassed in Auschwitz. He arrived in London as it started to swing, and in America as Timothy Leary advised to tune in, turn on, drop out.
What is it supposed to be? A bit of a Milky Way or something?
It's dust in a projector beam. On the 9th of August 1969, his pregnant wife Sharon Tate and 3 of his friends were murdered in their home in Los Angeles. The news went around the world. A group led by Charles Manson had done the butchering. The media twisted the event to involve Polanski in its blame. 8 years later, he had sex with a 13-year-old girl whom he was photographing for Men's Vogue. He was arrested and imprisoned for psychiatric tests. Under threat of further sentencing, he fled America and hasn't set foot there for 20 years.
I would like some water if there is any water around.
His first wife says there's a fire burning in him. The writer of Chinatown says he's an irritating little fart. He's usually spiky in interviews.
Our main conversation is going to be in the fancy room, but for the first wee bit, we'll look outside.
We met in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Polanski was charming off camera.
It's pretty, isn't it?
It's just great.
Here's what happened on.
Roman, your films give people nightmares.
Do they?
They give me nightmares when I was a kid.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Do you have nightmares?
Not that many. I think young people have more nightmares than the adults. Adults have them in the movies or in the books.
So does making films make you happy?
I'm happy when I find a subject that excites me, you see, that gives me a reason to make a film. And I'm still happy when I'm making it because this is my real and true profession.
What do you think is the best of your films?
Well, I can tell you the first time that I felt that I really got it technically smooth was a Rosemary's Baby. I can tell you that the first time I made a film that would make me happy because I felt the humor and the tone, the way I like it was the Vampire Killers. Chinatown was the first film where I had no struggle throughout the production because I was totally supported by the producer and had everything at my disposal. I was really, like a racing driver with a bunch of people standing around you and just ready to, to respond to every gesture. So I know that it's maybe my greatest achievement because of that. And also because it deals with something more serious and more important than devils or vampires.
And what it's about is the way that the city of Los Angeles stole water from the Owens Valley, isn't it? And Jack Nicholson plays a detective investigating the murder of the head of Water and Power Authority. And Faye Dunaway plays the wife of the murdered man. And then what transpires is that the personal story of Dunaway and the story of the land grab are related.
One day Jack called me and said there's this script that Bob Town wrote, which I think is very good. It required me to return to Los Angeles, and I was not very keen. It was only a few years after that tragedy where Manson's family killed Sharon Tate and several of my friends. And I my first reaction was not to do this. And then I read the script, and it had great character of Geddes, the detective, and dealt with a subject which was very appealing, particularly to Americans, particularly to Californians. So I decided to direct the film. But first it would have to be rewritten again. Then for some 8 weeks we were cloistered in a very hot room in the house that Paramount has rented for me. I made it really a subjective narrative. I was very rigorous about the construction. I believed and still do that you can't just settle one single problem in one scene, that each scene has to settle several problems of the plot.
Do you know me?
Well, I think I would have remembered.
Have we ever met?
Well, no,
Never.
never.
You see, I'm Mrs. Evelyn Mulray.
She gives quite a nervous performance.
Neurotic. Yeah, that was what was required. And the actress was a bit neurotic herself, so it was not
And
that
since you
difficult
agree
to
with me that
achieve.
we've never met before,
She had problems with her lines, she had problems with her delivery. She did not feel comfortable on the set. And when actors do not, they become very difficult with not only the director, but everybody else around them.
Is it true that you put the camera close to her and that added to this jitteriness of her performance?
No, I put the camera where it's required for the given shot, for the given scene. I do not
and since you agree with me that we've never met
put just arbitrarily the camera closer to an actor's face to do what? You have to cut like this in order to match it with the other shot.
Now, wait a minute, Mrs. Mulray. I think there's been some misunderstanding here. There's no point in getting tough with me. I'm just
I don't get tough with anyone, Mr. Geddes. My lawyer does.
I put the camera where I stand. I stand and watch the action. I stand and look what happens. And then I'm just trying to film it the way I saw it. It's simple.
Lots of people don't get it right, even though it's simple.
Well, you know, I think that there are other things that people don't get right. You just have certain predestinations. Maybe I have them for this.
And you tell a story in your book where you had to pluck a hair out of her head or something like that.
It was a scene over her shoulder on Jack Nicholson, and there was one hair sticking. The light was hitting this hair, so the hair had to be dealt with. So hairdresser comes and fixes it, you know, we roll and clap, and the hair is back again. It's a cut, it's a hair again. So he comes back, he fixes again, clap, roll. The hair is there again. Finally, I say, wait a moment, Faye, and I took the hair and plucked it. And you know,
She went mad.
She went crazy. And that was the end of shooting that day. You know, it's one of those days.
Whatever the relationship between you and her, whatever her unease on the set, it turned into a good performance, didn't it?
Well, it did. So for that reason, all the rest can be forgotten, and what matters is what remains on the film.
Mrs. Mulray, I think you're hiding something.
Well, I suppose I am. Actually, I knew about the affair.
How did you find out?
My husband.
And it's classic filmmaking in that scene, isn't it? There's like no camera moves.
I'm mainly an invisible witness to the events,
Mulray, you'll
you
have to
see.
explain that.
And my camera follows me, and for that I hate this convoluted moves which make you nauseous and interfere, in fact, with the story very often. I think If you have a story to tell, try to tell it in a simple or maybe elegant manner, and care about the emotions that it can evoke in those who are kind enough to watch it.
Now here's a scene where Jack Nicholson did his own stunt, a much less controllable situation. What do you remember about that?
I remember Jack said one take only, because it was him. He didn't have a stuntman. I wanted him to do this stunt. We didn't know what was going to happen. We couldn't rehearse this scene. I said, well, what can happen? You just, you swim. You're not going to be drowned. But
you risked the health of your star.
Well, what health, I think.
So here's the famous bit.
They lose their noses.
Why do people wince so much at that?
Because it's realistic. It looks convincing. In fact, I think it's not such a big deal to have a nose cut,
The blood really flies out, doesn't it? It doesn't just
Well,
dribble.
it was well designed, the trick.
Who designed it?
I did, actually. But I think they also, Jack's acting has a lot to do with it, and the scene is dense and it's convincing.
Anyway, what about this scene coming up where your main characters kiss? Now, Robert Towne says that he felt it was very brave to do that in bathroom lighting. There's nothing romantic about the way this scene is lit.
Well, as long as you're unconventional, people enjoy it.
God. Something black in the green part of your eye.
That. It's a flaw in the iris.
Flaw?
Yes. It's a sort of birthmark.
Why did you want them to go to bed when it wasn't in the script?
Because I thought it was important that they have some intimate relationship. It changes the rapport between them for the second part of the picture. Something serious starts between them, and the events are working against it. If they don't have this relationship, it doesn't matter so much in the second part. You don't think it works this way?
Yeah.
I do think it works this way, but
If it works this way, so it means that we were right.
You could argue that it's the conventional thing to do, couldn't you?
That it's conventional thing that they go to bed together? I would say just the opposite. Usually it isn't, because they think there will be more of a tease if they don't.
I'll tell you the truth.
Good. What's her name?
Up until this point, we've been led to believe that she's hiding something, and then what happens here?
Well, she reveals the secret.
She's my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister. She's my daughter. My sister, my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister and my daughter.
This is one of the most memorable scenes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's because the emotional content, and because the way I got the information out of her. Robert tried many ways, and were always speeches that smacked of explanation. It just she wouldn't say it, she wouldn't tell. Whatever angle he will take. I said the only way she can tell it if you physically force her,
beat it out of her,
beat it out of her, and that's what we did, and it seems absolutely natural, and nobody wonders why she, it's just nobody will contest the realism of the scene.
At one point in the film, John Huston's character, he says that given the right circumstances, people are capable of anything. Given what you've been through, do you think that's true?
I don't know. That's a very interesting philosophical question. Some people do, others don't, you know. And you wouldn't have heroes if this was true. You wouldn't have people who resist torture if it was true. I've been to quite extreme, I went through quite extreme tests, but not the extreme ones, so I don't know.
It's well known that the end of Chinatown was very much your ending. Robert Towne said that it was the tunnel at the end of the light. Why did you feel it was necessary to have the Faye Dunaway character killed?
Because if it all ended with happy ending, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this film today.
Come to my...
Get away from him!
How many years have I got? She's mine, too.
She's never going to know that.
If you want to feel for Evelyn, if you want to feel that there's in general a lot of injustice in our world, that you want to have people leaving the cinema with a feeling that they should do something about it in their lives. If it's all dealt for them by the filmmakers, they just forget about it over dinner, and that's it. As I was a kid when I saw Mice and Men, I remember I loved that film, and it stayed with me for so long, and I felt so sorry for that Lenny, and I thought, what a pity that Lenny couldn't be saved. And then I realized if Lenny was saved, I would forget about this movie the next day.
Keep looking. Just keep looking.
Oh, I'm looking, George. Oh, I'm looking.
It's gonna be nice, Stanley. There ain't gonna be no trouble, no fights. There ain't gonna be nobody mean to nobody, steal from you. It's gonna be nice.
Yeah, I can see it. Right over there. George, I can see it.
And you wrote this scene?
I wrote that scene, I think, a night before we shot it, because we had a falling out about this ending with Bob.
Gotta call a captain. Get an ambulance.
At that time, he didn't believe that it was the right approach. He said many times since that it was. So film almost came to the final stretch, and we still didn't have the ending. And there was another point on which we disagreed. I kept saying that there must be a scene in Chinatown. If you call a movie Chinatown, you have to, it somehow has to relate, even if it's a symbol for something, but it's a symbol taken from reality.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
What is Chinatown then? What does it symbolize in Town's script?
Oh Christ, you keep asking me these questions which I'm embarrassed to answer. It's like you ask...
You used yourself the word symbol there, didn't you?
Yeah, but you know, I don't explain symbols. It's like asking a poet to explain a metaphor, you know. And I just don't do this, you know.
Okay.
And there's certain things I don't do anymore, you know.
Winding the clock back, you were born in this city of Paris, but you were brought up in Krakow and lived through the Krakow ghetto. Are those experiences a long time ago now? Are they often in your mind?
They're more in my mind recently than before for several reasons. One of them is that I have children now, and I relate to these events through their eyes somehow, and also through the imaginary eyes of my parents. After the war, I just swept it all under the carpet, and so did everybody else I knew around me. and you don't talk about it, you just go on living, you don't want to hear about it, you don't want to see movies about it, you don't want to read books about it, etc. Those books and those movies made about these days were for someone else, for other people. And after a certain time, you reach certain distance and also certain maturity, and you return to those events.
Why did you not accept Steven Spielberg's offer to direct Schindler's List? It's
Schindler's
closer to your experience, isn't it?
Schindler's List was really about Krakow Ghetto.
Yeah.
That's where I was.
Yeah.
To do a film about that particular ghetto and the people who went with Schindler, it's too close on one hand and too far on the other. Too close because it deals with the days and with things, with walls, with streets that I know intimately, and too far because it deals with this group of people who were saved by working for Schindler. If I were to go through the pain of recreating it all, I would rather do something about my own childhood, about my own persona and people around me. I was brought up, as a pampered child until all that happened. I had loving parents, particularly my mother. My father also loved me. My mother was really close to me at that age. It's rather, the family romance. And that's how it ended.
What age was your mother when she was deported?
She must have been 30, somewhere like 37 or 38.
And do you have strong memories of her?
Yes, I have memories of her. Strong, no.
I
have
imagine.
Memories of her songs. I have memories of her makeup. I have memories of her smile. She was a great mother.
After the war, you got into acting, and then you made your first feature film, Knife in the Water, and it got an Oscar nomination, didn't it, and took you to New York.
Got a cover of Time magazine, and it was sparkling. I didn't know Hollywood. I didn't know about Hollywood yet, except I knew the movies, that's all.
And so then you moved to London and you made two British films, didn't you? Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve and Cul-de-sac with her sister Françoise d'Orléac. And then you met Sharon Tate. You were to make a film called Fearless Vampire Killers, and the producers wanted you to cast her.
Her name is Sharon Tate. She's today's kind of girl, bursting with youth. It's happening fast for Sharon Tate. Her second film is The Vampire Killers.
I've got a bit here of Fearless Vampire Killers. What were the pleasures that you had in making that picture, for example?
Well, first of all, the atmosphere on the set was extremely pleasurable. A lot of fun. It was really fun making this film because of the subject matter, probably, which was a spoof on Hammer movies. It was also the first time I shot on Panavision.
Thank you.
And at first you thought that Sharon Tate wasn't Jewish enough looking?
Yeah, we put a red wig on her.
Yeah, I've got the scene here, a very funny scene where the vampire comes down and attacks her. that's an example of the pleasures of cutting and getting the vampire to go down.
You
in
have
one
different
shot.
rhythm of the scene. You have to. I'm just same way following my eye. In a moment like this, you look around like that, so a bunch of quick shots. But it's not the usual fruit salad that you see now on the screen, where you, when the filmmaker is unable to sustain the one single action in one shot, he has to show it for 3 or 4 different angles. I mean, that drives me nuts.
So, staying with scary movies, in 1968 you made Rosemary's Baby, a darker picture than Fearless Vampire Killers.
Yeah, well, to me, Rosemary's Baby is not an entirely serious movie. It can be interpreted 2 ways. I shot it in such a way that you could consider her as a person with problems and imagining it all.
And you made it more ambiguous than the book?
Indeed, that's what I did. That's why I never showed the baby.
Yeah. Okay. We've got this amazing sequence where she's impregnated.
This part is definitely a dream. Now you may believe that the second part of her nightmare is happening for real.
Why are you taking them off?
To make you more comfortable.
I am more comfortable.
Sleep roll.
It's silent at the beginning of the dream. Why?
Because I think that there's something in the dreams that make it different from reality. I think mainly it's the sound. It's sort of as you heard your own breathing. I'm proud of using it for the first time because I've seen many others made this way now. I just remember what dreams are. I think we more or less dream the same way.
Isn't Hutch coming with us?
Catholics only. I wish we weren't bound by these prejudices, but unfortunately...
What also is typical in dreams is this fluidity that you talk to a person and that person suddenly is not the person it was, but someone else. Today, with the digital, with the possibilities that the computer gives you, you could do it 10 times better. But then we were limited with what we had. I wish I could do this sequence having the hardware that is at our disposal nowadays.
This is no dream. This is really happening.
Your new film is also about the devil.
A different way, though. My new film has more irony in it, more humor, I'd say. I enjoyed the book, and I thought it has all elements that come right up my alley. It's
like what? Name some of those elements.
Well, the suspense, the humor, very colorful secondary characters, cliché to a great extent, but allowing me to deal with them in a novel manner. A kind of Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe, drinking and chain smoking. It's fun. It's the things for which any movie lover has a nostalgia.
And the story is Johnny Depp's trying to find 2 more devil books to compare to the first one that he's been...
Let's say occult books.
Occult books. And that takes him into the world of the story. And he meets there a mysterious woman played by your wife, Emmanuelle Seigner. then Signé appears in a very unusual way. How did you do that?
With a wire.
Johnny Depp isn't as much of a boy in this film.
Well, for the first time, I think he's playing an adult, no? He's always somehow adolescent in practically everything he's done, no?
Your friend Kosinski, the novelist, said Roman has a talent for arrogance. What did he mean, do you think?
Well, you should ask him.
But he's not here.
Well, I can't answer for
what might he be getting at?
Well, you tell me.
I don't know. I would guess that he means that you get your point of view to the front in a situation. But I don't know you.
Well, is this really arrogance? I think arrogance is when you have nothing to say and you're trying to impose your view. If you have something concrete and something valuable to convey to the others, you should then use all means which are at your disposal to get this thing through and not letting yourself being hushed. Do you call this arrogance? I don't know. Making a film is a constant fight because you're not doing it on your own with your paints and canvas in front of you, and in the worst case, a modeler as the adversary. Here you have dozens of adversaries, because even if they are with you in this battle and behind you, they still have to a certain degree their own agenda, every one of them, and their own views, their own taste, their own approach, and you have to fight for your view to be prevalent. If you call this arrogance, then I am to a great extent. I don't call it arrogance, I call it rather perseverance.
Okay, let's, if you could tell me about Macbeth. Why did you decide to make a Shakespearean adaptation?
This is something I always wanted to do. My love of Shakespeare goes back to the times when I was a teenager and working in the theater. That was the time when I saw Olivia's Hamlet on the screen. That film just influenced me so much for the rest of my life. I loved everything about it. First of all, the atmosphere. And in those days, more than ever, I liked movies which made you feel that you are actually inside an interior, feeling virtually the fourth wall behind you. Like in Dutch paintings, this mysterious geography. You could not determine the shape of the castle. This camera gliding through these corridors. I love the photography and the music, just everything about it.
I've got here a scene from Macbeth. It's where Lady Macduff's son is killed by the henchmen of Macbeth. And I read in your memoir that you said that you used some of your memories of how the SS would come and raid apartments in Krakow.
One of the orders that was sort of daily virtually was not to stock any food. And I remember that my mother baked some little bread rolls, and my father said to get rid of them, and she decided to put it in a hat box, and the hat box was sitting on a wardrobe. You know, it was all full of things. You know, we were squeezed more and more from months to months when they were liquidating, putting people together in the smaller quarters. So these two Gestapo men came and just walked around that little apartment, and one of them had a stick, and sort of with this he was pushing various things around. And somehow he went straight to that box and pulled the box down, and all those breads fell down on the floor. And he just, swore something in German and laughed about it and didn't do much about it. But then one of them picked up my teddy bear, which I had since my baby days, and just sort of swinging it around, they walked out, and he took my teddy bear. And that was the thing that I somehow remembered when I was shooting this scene, and the behavior of those guys somehow inspired it. This is another thing, when they were raiding houses, you always heard those screams everywhere. On the second floor, on the ground floor, there was like stereo around your apartment.
Where's your husband?
I hope in no place so unsanctified where such as thou mayst find him.
He's a traitor.
Thou liest, thou shag-head villain!
What? You egg. Young fry of treachery.
He has killed me, Mother.
This is the first film, of course, that you made after your own wife was killed, and lots of the reviewers compared the film in some way, didn't they, to what is happening in your real life. Did that surprise you?
Well, what else can they do? But it's such a superficial observation, and so frequently, unfortunately, made in as far as my work is concerned. I did the play after in that period because everything seemed to me so empty, and I thought it wouldn't be proper to do a comedy, for example, and was looking for something more profound. And I decided to do a Shakespeare play, and I decided to do Macbeth, not because there was a lot of blood in it, for different reasons. Why would I rather do it after that? I don't understand. Just it's always that simplistic concept that the monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah. You said this other thing, which is you said you became more like your father at the end of the 60s. You had a sense that every joy had its cost, and you said you developed a more Judaic sense of guilt. Was that again, were you referring again to the
Well,
murder?
I was referring, of course, to the murder, naturally, because it happened at such a peak of happiness of both of us. We were expecting a child, we were both working, and our professional life was also very successful. Why should it be just destroyed for no reason at all? Don't you think it's absurd enough? And don't you think it's a good time to ask yourself the question, is there some kind of equilibrium in life that you have to pay for good times with bad times? And that's all. I don't.
Some people are lucky; they simply don't have bad times.
Well, it depends on what is the amplitude of your life, whether you leave it sort of flat or like this.
And yours is,
as they say, the higher you get, the harder you fall.
In Macbeth, the play, Shakespeare has this line, a great line: "Give grief words, And of course, what he's saying is that in order to respond to something awful that's happened to you, you need to express.
I don't know. Don't ask myself these questions. I don't let myself being psychoanalyzed because I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't feel the urge, and I do not self-analyze because I don't bother.
Yeah.
Don't you think there is a vague possibility that you make movies because you love movies?
Oh, absolutely. It looks to me as if, for example, a film like Fearless Vampire Killers is very much about the pleasure of making movies. But nobody, including you, works in a vacuum. And so, for example, like if you take the paintings in this room, they're paintings of naked ladies. One of the reasons why those paintings are made is because of the erotic feelings that the painters had about real women in the real world. Those painters also knew about composition and things like that.
I agree with you, absolutely.
So you can't, all I'm saying is that it's not wrong of me to talk about the way you draw, or any artist draws from their real life in order to make these things. Films, paintings.
Do you? Yes, but you putting it different way. You think that painting one of those naked lady helped this painter to release his sexual tensions?
In the case of Bouguereau, we know that it did. So it's not a good example you're using, but it's certainly an expression of what it's like to be alive, how great it is to be alive and how awful it is to be alive.
But I think what the most important thing is what we do see in the cinema. It's like, catering to your own desires of a film goer. My next film, which deals with the Holocaust and survival of the Warsaw Ghetto, I didn't have any urge of doing it. I knew I wanted to do it for certain reasons, but if I was somehow really, if there were problems stemming from my survival that could have been dealt with through my art, I would have done that film long ago.
Sure. Okay, let's move on. The next scene I've got is from your film The Tenant, which is my personal favourite of your films. And it's the story of a Polish man who's living in Paris in a very confined apartment, and the previous occupant of that apartment was a female Egyptologist, and he, in some way, starts to imagine himself to be her. Is that right?
That's it, yeah.
And why did you play the lead yourself?
Because I fit the character. I use the actors if they relate somehow to the character as it is described in the script or the book, and it seemed to me that I could do a good job with it.
Do you remember you used this Luma crane thing for lots of scenes?
Luma?
Luma.
Yeah, that was the first time the Luma was used. Then it was, all quite of discovery to all of us, and wasn't easy at all because it didn't want to go exactly where we wanted to go. But we managed after many rehearsals to get this long shot.
Towards the end of the film, and your character is about to jump from the window to commit suicide, and this is how he imagines his neighbours turning into a theatre audience.
That's right. I forgot this movie.
the time that this film was on release, and it's a film that many now rate as one of your best, your personal life went into freefall, didn't it? You were arrested on 6 counts of unlawful sex with a 13-year-old girl and imprisoned for 42 days.
Only last weekend, Polanski was released from prison after undergoing psychiatric testing. It's understood prison evaluators had recommended he be set free, but the judge would not go along with that recommendation. Roman Polanski's attorney appeared as shocked as everybody else by his client's apparent decision to flee the country rather than face sentencing.
And from then, you've been living here in Paris, where you made your next picture, Tess.
Mm-hmm.
This was a book that I think Sharon Tate had suggested you read, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
You said it was an extraordinarily cleansing experience. Why make this jump into what seems a very lyrical picture, a very golden picture?
I don't know why. How can I remember why? What was my state of mind? At that time, probably, I felt like I would like to see this type of movie. I told you, I cater to myself.
And one of the reasons, I'm sure, why it was cleansing is because your life in the years before that had been messy.
Probably.
You had to leave America. I've got here the opening scene of the film, or near the beginning of the film, where Kinski is dancing in the sunlight. There's dancing going on, and her father is going along in a cart. A very beautiful scene.
This scene, every shot is done a different day.
So the light was fading, and how long, is it literally an hour that you've got to catch it?
Oh yeah, that's sometimes less than an hour. So you have to schedule your day shooting in such a way that around 3 hours before you run to this location and prepare everything, so you can just shoot for 10 minutes every evening.
With finer skeletons than I.
Oh, Lord! It isn't your father riding home in his carriage.
Hey! Hey! The babier man in the whole of Wessex with finer skeletons than I.
Your father's tired.
He was a good actor, and he was a real drunk. That's why it looks so authentic.
Rows of nightly ancestors I got.
Tough stuff to get it all at this magic hour again with so many extras that have to dance on top of everything. Sometimes I plan in such a way that I got like 3 cameras. Like for example, first you shoot the long shot with the girls, and then you remove the camera quickly and jump to the other camera which is ready to shoot her closer. It was this type of gymnastics. It was quite difficult to get this scene shot at the sunset.
And was the cameraman still Jeffrey Unsworth?
It was Jeffrey Unsworth,
He shot 2001.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he tragically died during the making of this film.
Heart attack.
And it's a film about a young woman who is raped, and as a result of that rape, there's a child in Victorian society will not accept her and her child. Again, it seemed to the critics that you were in some way making a film that was either an apology for the fact that you had slept with this girl.
Them.
But screw them. But
well, talk to the critics. Why do you get me here? You know, me talk about those things. It's all just total nonsense.
The reason I get you here is because I like some of your films very much, and I want to talk to you about why, but at the same time it's not a surprise looking back to see the way that people saw the connection between the story of this film and what had happened in your real life. You can't have been surprised.
Mark, look, we both have crossed legs and both left on top of right. We both have black jackets. We both have watches on the left wrist, both have black shoes. You can find so many similarities. If you look for it, you just find anything you want.
But come on, these are shallow things you're talking about.
No, they're not. They are shallow.
Things.
Everything that I do affects my work. Even what I eat in the morning on that given day somehow influences everything we do. Is the result of the layers of experience.
That's disingenuous. You're talking about trivial things like what you eat or what trousers you've got on. I'm talking about things like the fact that you had to leave a country.
And what does it have to
because
do
the
with
judicial
this film?
system?
But do you think that the choice of a motion picture may have something to do with my with my problems at the time with American justice or society? This, first of all, you pick up the things from the book and you present it as a real theme of the book. No, the book, it's about position of a woman in Victoria's society.
Which is what I said.
Its subtitle is The True Woman, and it has little to do with everything that you said before. It's also about destiny, basically about destiny, much more interesting from the philosophical standpoint. And that's some kind of naive associations that you're trying to bring up.
It's a book, Roman, that I know well, and I know it's got those points. What I have found difficult in the conversation we've had today is your apparent refusal to accept that exciting relationship between someone and their work. The fact that momentous events in people's lives can some way change the tone of their work, the mood of their work,
they can
the
change,
subject of their work.
Of course,
it's nothing
they
to
can.
do with what you eat or what trousers you wear or what watch you have on.
Oh, it has a lot to do with it. It has a lot to do, definitely. And everything that you experience daily has somehow builds what's in you, that fellow in you that's going to create something. And I don't think that it's so simplistic, that because you live this, that immediately you will make your film as a reaction to it. And state of mind, yes, it's affected by important events in your life, but you don't illustrate it so naively as you present it. I'm sorry, Mark.
Roman, keep making great pictures. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, that's us. Thank you.
Will you disconnect me?
Sure. That was fun.
But isn't it good that we argue?
Yeah.
It's good. Au revoir tout le monde. Goodbye. Thank you. Bye bye.